project MPK Rauri. I am welcoming all the participants for this session. Also, I would like to thank you, Dr. Engineer Yughandhar Mandavkar sir, for accepting our invitation for this session. I would like to request Dr. Atre sir, Organizing Secretary of this training program, to introduce our today's speaker, Yughandhar Mandavkar sir. Atre sir, please.
Thank you, Vaibhav. Welcome to all participants and welcome Engineer Yughandhar Mandavkar. He did his bachelor's degree in agricultural engineering in 1983 from Punjab Rao Krishi Vidyapit, Akola. In fact, he is my classmate during bachelor's degree. Then he did his master's, that is MBA, postgraduate diploma in management from best management institute in India, that is IIM Ahmedabad. Since then, he is associated with watershed development through different NGOs. Way back in 87 to 90, he worked as project coordinator of watershed development with Social Center Ahmednagar. Then he worked with Marathwada Sheti Sahaya Mandal as project manager, watershed development. Then he worked as chief executive officer, grassroots action for social participation, GRASP. He worked with PACS, that is Poorest Areas Civil Society Program, Christian Aid, UK location in India, that is Delhi, as director. The Society for Action in Community Health, that is SWCI-CSW, New Delhi, as technical director. And since 2019, he is trustee of GRASP as well as freelance consultant in different watershed development programs. He has worked in different watersheds in India as well as outside India, like India, then Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Kenya, Nepal, Uganda. So in different countries, he has worked on this aspect, watershed development and management, plus climate change and climate resilience, then mitigation in Maharashtra. On these aspects, he has worked for very long period. So he has got practical experience of watershed development and management. We would be very fortunate to hear from Yughandhar Mandavkar. I'll request Engineer Yughandhar to start his topic presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Atre. Thank you, Dr. Mandavkar. So, welcome. We are going to start this session. I'll start with the PowerPoint presentation. I'll share my screen. Just give me a second for that. I hope the screen is visible to you now.
Yes, sir. Fine, sir.
No, आवाज.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
नहीं येत आहे.
अनम्यूट करते हैं. मांडवकर साहेबांना अनम्यूट करा.
नाही, मी अनम्यूटच आहे. Am I audible now?
असं हाताने करा. हात दाखवते तुमचं.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Please continue, sir.
नाही येत आहे ते त्याच्यावरती.
आता आता येते का?
हा येतोय सर, येतोय सर.
वैभव, त्यांच्या याच्यावरती ती खूण जी आहे ती बंद झाली
माईक.
दिसते. बिलकुलच बारीक आवाज येतोय.
नाही, आता मी बोलायला सुरुवात केली, आता येतोय का?
ओके.
की
हा,
व्हॉल्यूम?
प्रेझेंटेशन व्हायचंय. ओके.
Should we start? I'll start the presentation. If you don't hear me, just let me know. Okay. Otherwise, we'll switch to the mobile system. Is it okay, Vaibhav?
Fine sir, little bit raise your voice sir, little bit.
Okay.
Oh,
I'll speak in the microphone.
yes sir.
Yeah. So once again, good morning, everyone. We'll start this presentation. I'm going to present a case study on Kadvanchi Watershed project. Kadvanchi is a small village in Maharashtra, and it has been recognized as one of the big success story in drought proofing. So how watershed approach could be used for climate change adaptation? This is what I'm going to present in this slide. So I have divided this presentation in three parts. The first part will begin with the case study, uh, how the Kadvanchi village people proof their systems against drought, and then we'll move on to what is watershed management, what are the basics, what are the key factors that made these results possible. And the third one is the implications for climate change adaptations. And after that, we can have some time for our own clarification of doubts or questions and answers. So let's begin with the case study. Uh, this Kadvanchi village or Kadvanchi watershed, it falls in the semi-arid tropics with low and erratic rainfalls. It has got very hot summers. The rainfall is less than 700 millimeters. The location is in upper Purna basin of river Godavari, which is located at 19 degrees and 53 minutes north and 76 degrees and 47 east latitude. The altitude is between 498 meters to 648 meters. So it's not a very high altitude. This thing is a moderately low altitude undulated terrain. The rainfall has been 685 millimeters, for out of which about 78% is only during the monsoon season of June to October. The village area, the watershed area is about 1,888 hectares, little less than 2,000 hectares, and about 72% of it is under cultivation. So it's mainly an agriculture watershed. It's got very little public lands or forest area or areas under, you can say, scrub lands. It has got about 455 households with the population of 2,639. And most of these are smallholders. I mean, the small farmers and marginal farmers, as we call it in here. Now, this is the location. You can see this is Jalna district, which is almost in the center of Maharashtra state. In Jalna district, you have this in the northeastern corner, village Kadvanchi. Now, I'll give you a little bit of history. This was a project which was implemented by an organization called Marathwada Sheti Sahaya Mandal. It's a voluntary organization, a non-profit organization. And it was mainly to do the drought proofing and for regenerating the land and water and biomass resources of the watershed. The money came from National Bank, that is NABARD, and it was under the Indo-German Watershed Development Program. And this is a very old project I have chosen, that is almost 20 years old. 1997 to 2001 was the kind of implementation period. So I'm using this because even after 20 years of the project completion, you can see the results even today. What was the project famous for? So this was mainly about resource regeneration of the land resources, water resources, and the biomass resources. Then conservation of water, mainly land and water, and there were some supportive programs. Some of the key features of this approach was ridge to valley treatment. We started with the ridge at the upper reaches and slowly moved down the slope towards the valley. Total area coverage out of that 100, 1,888 hectares, almost 90% of the area was covered. Then soil conservation uh, was the main uh, instrument used for water augmentation. Generally, people in watershed development programs nowadays, you see that people construct dams and weirs, and they say that we have done water conservation. But here, almost we have a kind of assessment, rough assessment of almost 40% of the water which was conserved through the soil conservation, that is on the overland treatment. Then we did water budgeting. Then water use efficiency was improved through drip and irrigation methods. And there was a focus on high value crops which emerged as the water became available. So these are some of the interventions that we did. You can see the photographs on the right. In the non-arable area, that is the upper reaches, we did this contour trenches, continuous contour trenches, deep contour trenches, then treatment with afforestation and agroforestry. Then in the gullies, you will see the bottom photograph on the right, the gully plugs, this loose rubble gully plugs and loose boulder structures, these were constructed in the village. Then the main area treatment was farm bunding. Whatever the agriculture arable land was there, on that land, we did this farm bunds. And the farm bunds were done either manually or using bullock drawn terracer blade or using uh, the bulldozer. So equipment were used. Now this is a photograph on the top left. You will see some water is coming out of a farm. Now this is a bunt spillway. That is a kind of basic of the soil conservation. The soil conservation is not to kind of harvest all kind of water or arrest all kind of water. You have to give a surplus arrangement. So this is the surplus arrangement that we did. Use these clay pipes, which we also call the sewer pipes, uh, as bunt spillways. In the past, you used to use the stone bunt spillways, but stone bunt spillways have certain disadvantages. We'll talk about it little later. So these bunt spillways were used to kind of drain excess water which could accumulate in the heavy rainfall. Then, as you come down the streams, the gullies and the rivulets, here we constructed almost 30 cement plugs. I mean, cement plug is not an actual correct name. These were small weirs, either masonry weirs or the concrete weirs. And these are the photographs that you see. And then over a period of time, this is not something which we did as a part of the project, the 457 number of farm ponds came up. Now, farm ponds came up after the project was completed, and it came up rather in 2005 onwards, not before that. So this is something, the expenditure that we incurred on this project. Area treatment, the kind of farm bunds and the trenches and the CCTs that you saw, that was done on almost 1,500 hectares, and that worked out to be like 64 lakhs of rupees. That was almost 53% of the total cost. Then drainage line treatment, all those little bit of gully plugs, loose boulder structures, check weirs, dams, those worked out to be 42 lakhs or almost 34% of the expenditure. And almost 13% was spent on project management costs. That included that also included the awareness building and training and capacity building of the farmers. Now, this coming back to the this figure works out to be something like 6,467 rupees per hectare. Now, these are the 1997 prices. At that time, the norm was uh, 9,000 rupees per hectare at 10,000 rupees for the hilly area. So this was much below the national norm of watershed development. Now, what are the area treatments? So on public lands, slopey lands, Afforestation was done with continuous control trenches, plantation and seed sowing. Now, generally, the vegetation, if you want to re-establish the vegetation in hilly areas, plantation is considered to be one of the most popular method. But plantation is very expensive. Seed sowing is an alternative. It's also it's complementary. It's not an alternative. You have to do the plantation, but in addition, if you do some seed sowing, sowing of seeds of some local varieties, it will definitely help. So this was done on 157.1 hectare, and uh, just one moment. Yeah, can you see this screen? Yeah. So the total cost on of this was almost 12 lakh rupees. Agroforestry was done on public lands which are having relatively less slopes. That was done on 211 hectares. And agro-horticulture, this was basically dryland horticulture crops we preferred from starting with guava, uh, papaya. So that was done on almost 132 hectares. And the routine crops that you normally have as the staple food of common people, that was done on almost 1000 hectares, 995 hectares. So this in this fashion, almost 1500 hectares was treated. Then in the drainage line, almost 4620 meter length of gully plugs, loose rubber gully plugs were constructed. Gabions, I mean gabions are slightly modified gully plugs with the stones embedded in wire netting. That was done on 54 hectares. Some masonry gully plugs, small weirs were done, 9, 12, and 9. And some small earthen dams were constructed. So this was done in the watershed on the as a drainage line treatment. Now, these were the kind of interventions we made during 1997 to 2001. What happened after that? This made this conserved a lot of water, and the water became available to the farmers. So the farmers saw more and more water became available. They went in for more wells, and they went in for more remunerative crops. They went in for wheat, particularly that was the most popular crop, because wheat in this area, like large parts of central India, is a crop with lot of prestige or rather social status attached to it. But that increased the water demand, and that water demand was higher than the availability that got created with the watershed development. So what happened? The gap increased, and because of this increased gap, again people found it difficult to manage their water. So slowly drip and sprinklers came, then farm ponds, because what happens in hard rock areas, Deccan Trap, peninsular India, you will find there is always a surplus water in the rainy season between June to September, October, or until November, December. The streams flow and the water goes out of your watershed boundary. And suddenly from March, January, or sometimes February, you start facing the shortages. So these people thought that why not save this water which is going out of our watershed boundary in the rainy season. So they started constructing these farm ponds. Initially, some people did it, some rich people did it on their own. Then they thought that okay, we can get some funds from the banks, some we can get some subsidies from the National Horticulture Mission. So the farm ponds started becoming popular. Shed net house, basically to reduce evaporation and to kind of give some better growing conditions for certain crops. Greenhouses, when vegetable nurseries and seed plots, these are highly remunerative cropping systems. So people went in for that. And this is something very interesting. Most of the farms in the past were not accessible by large vehicles. I mean, bullock carts could go. Sometimes you had to kind of carry your farm produce on the head loads to the road and then load it on the bullock carts. But the moment people started getting production from all around, people thought that the roads are necessary. So this 41 kilometers of road got constructed within the village, and these were not public lands. People donated their lands to kind of construct the roads. This is very an interesting phenomena because you may have experienced quarrels over the farm boundaries, the bunds, because the farmer doesn't want to give an inch of his land to the neighbor. But here in this village, almost this 41 kilometers of land got constructed from by people donating, the farmers donating their own private land. Some of the convergence activities, I mean, these are the photographs of farm ponds and the green shed net houses and the greenhouses. These are the locations. I mean, look at this map. All these blue spots that you see, these are the locations of the farm ponds. And these farm ponds, uh, in subsequent years, provided a very good buffer against the shortages during non-rainy season. Uh, Shade net house and the seed plots. These are some of the broad-based furrow methods. I mean, that you may have heard. It is in a very ancient system that was used. And since the equipment were not readily available, the farmers thought that maybe one or two or three, four people kind of get this equipment, or the group of farmers, they will buy this equipment and they will hire it. So the custom hiring center, I mean, it didn't start as a custom hiring center. It started more of an individual uh, enterprise, or few individuals started owning this equipment and hiring it out. So slowly, this took a form of custom hiring center, and an informal group came up to provide these services at a very reasonable price to the other farmers. Uh, this is the bund spillway which I was talking about. Now, this bund spillway is made of pipes. This is not a stone spillway. The advantage of a stone bund spillway is that this pipe spillway is that uh, when you do it in the first or second year, you don't know how much rain you are going to get. This is an area, it's a drought prone area where you have very little, or rather, the predictability of rainfall is very low. As a result, you don't know this year whether I'll get so much of rain or so little rain. So if you have a kind of big shower and you get very heavy rain, there is a possibility that the heavy rain and the runoff could breach the bund. So in that case, you have to let out the water faster. So what the farmer does immediately, kind of he lowers the bund spillway. Suppose he realize that okay, this year the rainfall is not as much. Uh, we have to conserve a little more moisture. He can just, with a spade and with a pickaxe, he can just dig up the bund, pull up the pipes a little up, and place it back, so that he can conserve a little more moisture, maybe a little more water runoff in the farm. That you cannot do with the stone spillway. So that way, this was very convenient. Then initially we had this doubt, and rather it was also a little bit of experience in some remote farms, that these pipes get stolen, because the pipe is a very useful thing. Although it's a very short piece, maybe something like 2 meters, 3 meters in length, but still people have some need of it. So some pipes got stolen. But gradually, since the work was done on practically entire land, everyone had their own pipes. Plus, we got some spare pipes in the village, which the people could buy at a very, very cheap rate. I mean, if the market price is something like 100 rupees, the people could buy those pipes at 50 rupees from the village itself. So that whosoever wanted for these pipes for their domestic uses, for drainage or some bathroom, so they need not have to steal it from other places. It was available in the village itself. So these are the advantages of this pipe spillway as against the stone spillway, which was a kind of appropriate technology, relatively low cost, but much more convenient. Then normally there is a critique of most of the watershed projects that the women have very what we call notional roles. But here in this village, what we did was primarily uh, we needed lots of saplings for plantation. So we used this nursery, uh, set up the nurseries in the village. The nursery management was done by these women. Gradually, when people went in for horticulture, particularly the chilies and tomatoes, you need to kind of raise the saplings. The women's group came forward and raised those saplings and sold it to the village at a very nominal profit. So most of this, the risk was very well managed by this nursery management people, the women. Gradually, the women went in for setting up this pulse mill, a local mini dal mill, what they call, because red gram, that's Kejan has been a very major crop in this area, dryland crop in this area. Now, drudgery reduction is one area where normally most of the agriculture operations which require hard work are done by women. For example, picking of cotton. This is the area where cotton is a very popular crop. Uh, Cotton picking is a kind of laborious work, plus it's also hazardous. Hazardous in the sense when when you are doing the second picking, the twigs are dry, and then they scratch again. Got this gowns made of slightly thicker cotton material, not canvas. So it was breathing, but this prevented the injury to their arms. Second, in the past, women used to kind of carry the a kind of basket to collect this thing on the shoulder, which used to give uneven force on their spine. So we had devised a simple harness for a basket which can be hang on the back. So you're seeing this woman who's in the last photograph on the at the bottom. The woman, she's picking and putting the plucked cotton, the cotton balls from the side, and this kind of reduce a lot of strain on the spine of the women. Uh, we also provided bottled gas connection. This was much before the Ujjwala Yojana. Ujjwala Yojana is very recent, but way back in 1998, we got the LPG gas connection, and that time it was very difficult to get a new gas connection. Many of you may be remembering, even in urban areas, you had to wait for a long time. What we did that through this village SHGs, the women's SHGs, we directly approached the gas company and asked the gas dealer to give something like 20 new connections every 3 months to this village. And these women, they did not have so much of money immediately to kind of buy a new gas connection. So what they did was they used the SHG money to uh, uh, to buy the connection. They repaid the thing, and then the new members got it. That's why something like 20, 25 women every quarter could get this connection. These are some of the photographs. On the left hand side, you see the dal mill. It is Kajan or Arhar Tuvar ki dal machine. You have this organic compostry unit. Well, when irrigation increased, immediately you needed the mechanics or kind of electrician, mistri, to repair your motors and pumps. So we trained the youth in the village who learned the motor rewinding. These trainings were organized at the local, with the help of local ITS, uh, pump repairs, electrical equipment repair, threshers repairs. So a lot of youngsters who did not have any land or landless youth, they got employment because of this. Now, this is interesting that change in land use. This is an indication of how your production systems and the economics is changing. So here you are seeing that the cropland also increased by 10%, whereas the westlands reduced by 58%. So almost all the westlands which were not under cultivation, either private or public, they kind of became productive from almost something like 80 to 90 hectares of land became under production. Then season irrigation, which was only 500 hectares in the past, suddenly became almost 900. This is a very good quantum jump. And perennial irrigation. Now, this is something in India, we are saying that our irrigation potential cannot be more than 23%, 24%. We are struggling in many areas. We are struggling with between 20 to 25% is our irrigation potential. Here in this village, the perennial irrigation increased to 617 hectares. Now, uh, this 617 hectares is almost 35% of total land, whereas it is almost uh, 40, 42% of the cultivated land. Then, if you count the two-season irrigation, this becomes almost 1500, 1400 to 1500 hectares, which is almost 90% of your crop land is having irrigation facility. So you should have you have at least life-saving irrigation on 90% of the land. Now the cropping pattern also changed. The people cultivated their own staple foods and other crops, but something like the most important phenomena here was the increase in grapes, the area under grapes from 3 hectares to 480 hectares. This is very large quantum jump. Then other vegetables and horticulture crops like pomegranate, ginger, seasonal vegetables, they also increased over a period of time. In terms of money, the agriculture production was something like 77 lakhs before the project started. Today it is 48 crores and 480 millions uh, in gross terms. Per capita income was 3,000 rupees, little over 3,000 rupees in 1997. Today it is 1.44 lakh per person. It's not per family, it's per person. Then you look at the employment, the income from employment, that is wage employment, the poor people, normally the landless, used to get was 32 lakh before the project started. Now this village is earning 8 crores of rupees from wage employment. Now these are some of the kind of figures of agriculture production depending on the rainfall. Now, I said that the rainfall was something like 700 millimeters, 600 millimeters, but the actual rainfall in these 4 years, if you look at the data from 2012-13 to 2017-18, was between 198, so let's say 200 millimeters to 400, little over 400 millimeters. The maximum rainfall was 412 millimeters, which was 60% of the annual average rainfall. And at that time, in 2015-16, the storage in ponds was 1,050,000 cubic meters. But that was the year where you could get almost 520 million, that is 52 crore rupees of agriculture production in one season, 1 year. So these figures, so even if you have very severe drought, as you had in 2012 and 13, 200 millimeters of rainfall, you people could earn 27 crores of rupees from agriculture alone. Now, I'm not adding the livestock figures in this because we did not have proper, we did not collect the data at that time. But now, almost the same amount is almost uh, 30 crores, 20 crores of rupees are being are earned by the people from livestock also. Okay, now to summarize the case study. What the project did was basically regeneration of land and water resources, that is soil conservation, water conservation. It the project motivated the community to take care of the resources. And normally what happens, the post-project maintenance is a major issue in most of the projects. The people, once someone constructs a dam and it gets silted up, people don't bother. Here, Every year, the farmers do the desilting of dams on their own. Farmers take care of the public plantations on their own. In fact, youth groups have been kind of protecting the forest lands and the plantation for almost 10 years after the project started. Then facilitated the improvement in production process. What is this facilitation? You have this agricultural extension department. I mean, it was agriculture department whose main job was actually agriculture extension. Just to tell farmers, okay, this you do this, these are the technological aspects that you can look at. This was done in, through MSSM, the organization. The scientists from MSSM went to the villages and guided the people, okay, this is how you can save your water, this is how you can increase your productivity. So that kind of extension work was done. Then pragmatic methods of value addition. The example was the dal mill. Uh, Instead of selling just the raw red gram, you could add value in the village itself. Similarly, other dal, that is chana dal, which is a winter crop there, was also produced in the village itself. Then skill building of community in technical, social, and institutional domains. Now, this skill building, it was very on a very simple things of how to do weeding, how to do integrated pest management. Because at that time, the genetically modified uh, BT cottons were not as popular, but gradually that reduced the importance of integrated pest management to some extent. Integrated pest management, the youth were trained in scouting, identifying the uh, different types of pests, how to control that without with little chemicals, how to reduce the uh, inputs. So these things were so kind of these are the technical aspects. Social aspects, how to kind of do collective crop planning. Suppose we have very little water this year, how do we kind of use that water more productively so that nobody suffers and the crops also sustain. Now, the project achievements, just to summarize, the physical impacts were primary production increased to 7 to 10 times more than what it was in the past. Horticulture emerged as a new livelihood. Horticulture, I mean both fruit trees as well as the seasonal vegetables. Or rather, through this greenhouses and the shed net, people, small farmers who did not have very large area and who could not have annual supply of water, they went in for high value off season horticulture production, vegetable production through this shed nets and greenhouses. Income level increased tenfold, more than 20 tenfold. Employment generation led to the import of labor. Earlier, almost 50% of the youth from the people from this village used to migrate seasonally to the neighboring irrigated areas for employment. Now they are net importers of labor. Newer technologies. Uh, just 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when I visited this village, I found that the electrostatic sprayer are common. There were 10 electrostatic sprayers in the village for spraying on the grapes. Then community management of water resources, corrective crop planning, which I already mentioned, based on availability of water in the month of October and in the month of March, people plan which crop they should take in the winter, that is the Rabi season or the summer season. Some more achievements. What are the social and institutional impacts? One was increased attention to health, sanitation, education, and today you have almost every third house has a child, girl child going to college, which was really, I mean, there was no girl child who had graduated when the project started. But today you are having almost as many. Okay, now I have a little difficulty with the battery thing. I don't have power supply. So maybe we can shift to the mobile presentation. I'll speak on mobile and then but let's continue. I mean, as so long as the power is there. Okay, Vaibhav?
Yes, sir. No problem, sir.
Okay. Uh, I have still 10% battery. Okay. Then social mobility and social relations also improve. Housing and living conditions improve. Most of the farmers who used to live in the village have now migrated to their own farms. So the farm level, they have constructed farm houses, you can call them, and they are living in there. The watershed committees, water user groups, they are doing a lot of kind of uh, they're very active and they're attending to many social and economic development related aspects. Now, this is something how this happened. Let's look at the scientific aspects of it. Although you had on the very first day, you had a session in the afternoon where you talked about watershed development, but I'll very briefly repeat this. Yeah, it may be a repetition, but I'm going to talk about it once again. Uh, One was uh, what is watershed? You must have heard this definition 100 times before, but still, it's a geographic area which is drained by a system of interconnecting streams into a single concentrated outlet. So that is the definition of watershed. But watershed is basically a water handling unit. It is we use watershed for planning because it has got certain advantages. Now, what are these advantages? The first is that the regeneration of basic resources should be done on a hydrologic unit, and watershed is a hydrologic unit. Second, since it's a natural unit, it doesn't follow the systems or rather artificial rules. It follows the natural rules of water, which are governed by the simple physics, simple uh, geography, simple biology. Now, for a planner, whether it's a small watershed or a large watershed, it gives it makes kind of allows you to do use some planning models and algorithms which can be applied to all kinds of watershed, whether small or large. Then the next is uh, if it is if you look at it historically, most of our water resources were managed on the watershed basis. So it is something not new, or it's not something modern day technology. It's an ancient thing. Many people know about it. Now, this is a definition which I would like to kind of share with you. This definition was given by an organization called Myrodot, which was working in Karnataka on watershed management from almost 1980s. So they are also one of the pioneers in southern India. They say that the watershed management is a framework. It's not a technology. It's a framework for integrated, viable, and decentralized pattern of development of people. It's a development of people living in an area where water is scarce and it's a mismanaged resource. It's not something that it's a natural vagaries or God's wrath. It's a mismanaged resource, and that's why the area is degraded. And in this area, the exploitation of resources, that is land and water, and exploitation of people have resulted in overall degradation, overall leading to growing poverty, inequality, and inability to cope with stress. Now, this is the last part, the inability to cope with the stress is something we define as vulnerability today. This is the the vulnerability is complicated by the uh, more by the climate change factors that we are experiencing. And watershed management is an approach which can overcome this inability to cope with the stress. So, uh, coming back to the watershed management simplified definition, is that it is a management of natural resources in a geographic region, primarily strengthen the life support system of the community. That is basically improving the livelihoods of the community. So thereby you are improving the living standard or standard of living of every person in the watershed. Now, when you are aiming at strengthening the livelihoods, what do? You should follow the rich to valley approach. Start with the upper reaches, go down to the valley, to the rivers, to the streams. Next is you have to use the scientific knowledge and people's traditional wisdom. So that normally a lot of people know how to deal with it because they are the people who have been living there. They know how to uh, manage their resources. They have seen the drought. They have seen the stress. They have their own methods. But can their methods be strengthened a little by giving modern scientific knowledge? That is the role I would say that you and we all have to play. Then participation. Now, participation is something which is a much abused word. You would have seen that people attending meetings is not just that is not just participation. Then choosing appropriate technological options with the informed choice of the people is actually participation. You make the people understand what the technology is. You make the people use that technology and really adopt it to their conditions. It's not something that you have developed something in the university laboratory and then you are transplanting it on the people's, you're imposing it on the people. So this is participatory technology development or participatory processes. These are important. And these are based on very, very simple scientific principles. And since they are based on simple scientific principles, they can be replicated anywhere, wherever you have similar conditions. Now, coming back to the uh, basic components, which we already discussed, but it is basically regeneration of land, water, and people. Now, this regeneration of people is what I mean by that is basically make people aware that they know something, have faith in their knowledge, make them use that knowledge and adapt to the modern conditions with the help of modern technology. So that is regeneration of the people or people human resources. That can be done through skill building, awareness building. That is the third component that you as technologists should be aware of. Then facilitate the improvement in production process with basically agriculture extension. Unfortunately, all over the country, our agriculture department is just preparing paperworks and writing schemes. There is no technology transfer from the institutions, research institutions to the people. So this is something which is a big gap that you can fill up. Next one is introduce the concepts and methods of value addition, or what we call in the modern times, we call it uh, value chain management. So what are the value additions options? Simple value additions option, what we call primary processing at the farm level, simple grading, rather packing, selling the material at the right moisture content is also a value addition factor. You take grains with high moisture content, the trader will give you much less price. If you do it at a higher moisture content, it will be the trader will give you a better price. Then skill building on these technical aspects, how to do sorting, grading, how to do primary processing. Then social institutions, how to manage your maintenance fund, how to collectively do uh, your desilting of tanks. Now, desilting of tanks, if you kind of ask the Gram Panchayat to do, it is a very long drawn process. But if you ask a group of people, okay, this is the kind of tank this is the kind of dam which affects your wells. Why 10 of you, 20 of you not manage it on your own? So these small groups can do it much better. So these are the little social institutional modifications that you can do in your watershed. Now, I'm coming to the end of my presentation with this last couple of slides, 3 slides. Uh, there are 3 aspects that you should be particular about in watershed development. This is the Kadwanchi experience taught us. A good combination of engineering and vegetative measures of soil conservation. So, let me tell you, all the engineers will tell you that your mechanical measures of bunds and trenches, they are important. And agronomists will tell you, no, no, that is nothing. You have to use grasses and seeds and vegetation. But actually, the truth lies in between. In a degraded ecology, you need some engineering, you need some soil working so that the vegetations can grow and the vegetables, the vegetative growth can happen. And the vegetative growth is the thing that keeps your engineering soil conservation measures last longer. The second is augmentation of water and its utilization should be done with clear economic mandate. Many projects, unfortunately, I have seen they want to show water. Oh, we have got this water in our bank. We have got this water in our village, but it doesn't seep into the ground. There is no percolation happening from the percolation tank. The water is not recharging any wells. What is the use of it? It's not for recreation. It has to be used for the purpose. It's used to be for the economic growth. That is for the productive purposes. The third is community involvement is should be based on scientific principle. There are projects where people say, oh, we kind of bring people together to do this fight social evils. The social evils will be fought, no problem. But before that, the people should address their own things, own production related things with very, very scientific methods. Uh, Climate change variability is nothing but the biggest manifestation in drought prone areas is the drought. The variability of rainfall affects in terms of water availability. That is what we call drought. Drought is the condition where you don't have water at the right time when the people need it. Now, this affects your agriculture production. It affects your food security. It affects your energy consumption, land, water resources. It affects everything. It leads to migration and it also causes health problems. And these problems affect the poor more. So you have to be a bit careful on that aspect. The third aspect is watershed management, as we have been doing it, soil and water conservation with focus on regeneration of the resources and their utilization for the livelihoods. So these will improve the ability of people to combat the stress caused by the variability of climate. So what you are doing, hydrologically speaking, you are flattening the hydrograph in a watershed project. That is the simply speaking, the hydrologic interpretation of watershed development work. Then what does that the flattening of runoff hydrograph does? Makes water available for a longer period of time in spite of the variability in climate or variability in rainfall. So you can do it if you involve the community in with this on the scientific basis, then possibly the effects will be long lasting. That's why I use this case study of 2001 to talk about in 2020. Just two little things I would like to say that you just don't use watershed development for climate change adaptation or disaster risk management reduction. You link it with the livelihoods, because if people get money, people's incomes increase, people have some visible benefits, they will kind of protect your soil water conservation structures. They will kind of take it forward. And secondly, the planning. Uh, don't kind of go on digging one pit here and one pit there. You plan it well, very systematically, very scientifically, and then go ahead. So I will end here. So thank you very much for patiently listening. We'll get into questions and answer session. But
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
In case my connection fails,
Yeah.
just allow me a few minutes to kind of switch to the mobile.
Okay,
But we'll continue on this. We'll continue on this platform.
Yes, sir. Meanwhile, you can join by mobile, sir.
Okay, okay. I'll join on mobile. I'll disconnect
So,
this one.
no, you can keep this one.
Okay.
Okay, fine, sir.
Is it possible to join on two different platforms
Yes, sir.
simultaneously?
Yes, sir. No
Okay.
problem.
Let me check.
Meanwhile, participants are requested to post their questions. If anyone having any doubt or have to ask any question to Mandavkar sir, they can raise hand by pressing the raise hand button, or they can post in the chat box. Okay, sir. You have joined by YM Pro 7 name.
Yeah, YM Pro 7.
Okay, okay,
Okay, you can see it on.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Good. So then I will switch off this computer and
Yes,
continue
sir.
on.
Mm-hmm.
I'll leave this chat from here. Okay, you made me co-host. Very good. So I will.
Hello, sir. Hello, sir. We are not getting your voice, sir. No, sir. Still not. Mm-hmm. Sir.
Hello. Hello. Hello.
Hello. Sir. I think Mandavkar sir is not getting our voice, and we are not listening his voice. There is technical problem. Atre sir, shall we do one thing? I will mail these 2-3 questions to Mandavkar sir and take answers from him, and we will post to the our WhatsApp group of participants. Is it okay?
As we are planning
Yes. Yes, sir. Also, we are planning on 27th one panel discussion session. So in that session we can put these questions. Okay, sir.
Yes.
Okay.
वैभव
Yes, sir.
मांडेकर सरांना बघ विचारून
Yes, sir.
whether interested or not.
Hello.
हा मांडवकर सर कनेक्ट झाले की नाही?
He is connected, sir.
Hello.
Sir. Still
Hello?
we are.
आता येतोय का आवाज येतोय?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. There are 2-3 questions, sir.
Okay. Yes.
First question is from engineer Sachin More. He is asking, like Kadwanchi village, is there any village adopting water conservation measures in Marathwada region?
There are many. In fact, Adgaon is the first one. Hello.
Yes, sir. Continue, sir.
Adgaon is the first one, which was 1984 to 1989.
Okay.
Hello.
Sir.
Sorry, I switched on to my mobile.
Okay.
There are many. In fact, before Kadwanchi, we also had this Adgaon project, then Jadgaon project near Karmad in Aurangabad district. There was this Sita Naik Tanda, Boltek, and if you recall, I think Sandeep Jadhav is on the line in the group. Indo-German watershed projects promoted almost 30 odd watershed projects, which had more or less similar results. I mean, I would say Kadwanchi is exceptional, maybe because of graves, maybe because of some other things, maybe because the people were more active compared to others. But almost all of these 30 villages, you had 3 to 4 times increase in income. The reverse migration. Reverse migration means the people started coming back and settling in the village. Almost 50%, 60% of 2-season or life-saving irrigation, to 50% of the geographic area got irrigation. So these changes occurred in at least 30, 40 watersheds in Marathwada.
Okay. Jadhav sir is also unmuted. They can also highlight some remarks on these questions.
So as Yugandhar mentioned, there are plenty of watersheds. Those have been developed by individual NGOs, government agencies, as well as Indo-German program. And these districts include, you have watersheds in Beat district, you have got good watersheds in Nanded, in Kandar block, you have got watersheds in Jalna district on large scale, including Kadwanchi that Yugandhar has mentioned. And you have many watersheds in Aurangabad district. Latur also, there's a watershed from TIS, Tata Institute of Social Sciences in Latur. And I think we missed probably Parbhani district and Hingole district, Yugandhar, right? Otherwise, in all the districts, there are examples of watersheds. Apart from that, now in the recent years, Pani Foundation also has developed some watersheds across these districts. So if you want to find out, there are plenty of watersheds to visit, right now as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Next question is from Shashikant Mehtre, sir. Considering current scenario of climate change, how to address prosperity through smart technologies, that is more efficient resource utilization, which leads to emergent livelihood through climate smart watershed?
Well, watershed itself is a climate smart approach, I would say. So, as I said earlier, that you are flattening the hydrograph. So what you are doing is that you are countering the variability of rainfall through conservation, soil conservation and water conservation. You do soil conservation primarily so that water conservation also takes place. Now you have this tiny little technologies and a good number of them. I mean, CREDA has developed, or rather, CREDA has documented more than 100 small little techniques, uh, which you can call climate smart. They are basically to overcome the variability. Uh, First, I mean, if you remember, about 20 years ago, I mean, this was before the climate smart term came into picture. What used to the agriculture department advised the farmers? Use the reflectors, spray spray the crop with 2% urea, 1% urea, spray the crop with lime solution, that is calcium hydroxide. Why? Because it reflects more this thing. You reduce the transpiration by cutting down certain vegetation. So these were all climate smart technologies which farmers used to do traditionally on their own. We used to do thinning, and particularly if you look at it, one of the climate smart traditional method of people was using this multiple cropping, I mean mixed cropping. uh, Particularly in this western Maharashtra, you will see that bajra was never grown alone as a sole crop. It was always grown with mat, moog, hulga, and tur. So why did it happen? Because these crops require moisture. The moisture requirement, peak moisture requirement, is offset in on time frame. Secondly, their rooting depth was also different. So they are drawing water from different zones. So these are some of the climate smart methods which people traditionally used to do. Today, we are using this drip irrigation, sprinkler irrigation to reduce this thing. But even if you have very good ridges and furrows, well designed ridges and furrows, according to the soil type, possibly your water saving is higher than what you can say with a drip in normal conditions. The third thing I would say is that choice of crops. Most of the time, we, I mean, our farmers go for crops which are, my neighbor has sown this, so I'm going to sow this. Or wheat is something I know that in Maharashtra's conditions, wheat is not a very remunerative crop because our agroclimatic conditions are not so good. But still, we go for it because uh, it has got a social status. Instead of that, you concentrate on millets. Millets are most of the millets are either C4 plants or CAM plants. So their water conservation, water requirement is already very low. So these are the crops which we should. The crop choice is also very climate smart technology. I mean, on climate smart technologies we can talk a lot, but I would like to restrict to these very basic and commonsensical methods.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Shashikant sir is also online, sir. Sir, you can highlight some points on these questions, sir.
Okay, okay.
Mhm.
Hello.
Sir.
Shashikant, you are please unmute yourself.
Yes, sir.
Hello.
Sir. Please continue, sir.
Just I want thanks to Mandavkar sir for the excellent presentation and very informative. But just I want my some query about this. We are developing the watershed in uh, last 25 years from Maharashtra and lot of more in India. But till there is a gap between supply side and demand side. Day by day, demand is increasing and supply side is only rain. And there is no concrete coping mechanism to address this issue because as per my thinking, the I am asking Sir Mandavkar sir, this Sandeep Jadhav is also there because he is the my guru of field guru and theoretical guru is Apre sir, Sindhe sir also. So my concern is actually till today lot of gap between supply and demand side. Need and greed, maybe need and greed. There is unbalance. Maybe it leads to behavior change. If till community has not understand where we have to stop, that is the means need and greed, then supply and demand side may not be smartly managed. Smartly managed, I think. That's a I question. Please, Mandavkar sir and Sandeep Jadhav, can you think any innovative idea? For example, in Kharif season, there is a dry spell and people are using groundwater, maybe pumping hand pump wells. But we can aware about any dry spell, we can use the surface water that is a gravity. Then evaporation is also reduced some things and groundwater is saved because EFD is reducing at the time of that's why that times of conjunctive use may be smart technology. I think as my perception. So that types what are the different new innovation that is the smart technology of supply side and demand side coping mechanism in concern. Thank you.
Actually, Shashikanji, I must thank you for answering your own question yourself because you said that there are two reasons. I mean, yes, one is this need versus greed. So I'll answer that in this fashion, giving the example of Kadwanchi again, that in the month of October, we sit together, the farmers sit together and decide, okay, what we should do. If we go for this water intensive crops, we'll have problems. Normally in rainy season, as I'll come back to that later, normally in rainy season, we don't do any planning, which is a mistake because you need to do planning even right from the beginning of June. Even for Kharif, you have to do water use planning. But if you collectively do and see, people don't learn without any shocks. That is also equally true. In our villages also, not only in Kadwanchi, in 10 other villages, I will tell you, people went in for wheat. The moment they saw water in their wells, everyone planted wheat. And the moment they started pumping, immediately the drawdown, as we call it, the water levels started depleting faster. And after 3 or 4 irrigations, wheat in Maharashtra requires 8 irrigations, 9 irrigations. The soils are not as good that we need more water. So most of the people suffered by loss of crop, loss of productivity. Why? Because they could not irrigate the fifth or sixth or seventh irrigation. They could not irrigate their crops the fifth or sixth or seventh time. So immediately they realized, yes, it is our greed that pushed us into this kind of disaster. So next year onwards, immediately on their own, uh, no amount of what you call prabodhan, as we call it, uh, no amount of education will work unless people suffer a shock. So that is how happened in most of the places. That once they got the shock, they realize, okay, we have been unnecessarily greedy. Let's do little bit of logic. Uh, but that doesn't happen in year one. You have to kind of consistently do the crop planning, collective crop planning year after year. Second question, I mean, second part, which also uh, draws to our argument that we should have crop planning for Kharif also, is that conjunctive use. It's not conjunctive use. I mean, it's the commonsensical thing is that you should use first the soil moisture. If the soil moisture is inadequate, then you apply irrigation. So first, your soil conservation work should give you adequate soil moisture for that particular crop. But if your crop needs more and you have dry spell, then you have to apply irrigation. Which one you should use first? The commonsensical thing is that you should use the water which is running away from you faster. So which is that water? The one which is flowing in the streams. So do you have a pump? Can you lift the water in a flowing stream? That is the first choice. If that is not there, what is the next easily available option which you are going to lose is the shallow groundwater. And if the or if you have any storages which are likely to evaporate faster. Now, evaporation is a very tricky thing. You don't know how much is evaporating and how much is percolating from a water body. So if you have a slight inkling that in this particular pond or in this particular tank, more water is evaporating and less is percolating, I would use that the next. Then the third priority is the shallow groundwater. And then the fourth priority is the deep groundwater. uh, your deep groundwater, that is your bore wells or open wells. Now, this is a very commonsensical thing to talk about. How do you make farmer understand that what is happening in this? So that for that you have this simple technique, what we call the farmers field school. Every week, every 15 days, meet at one well, two wells at the farm pond level, and then see what is happening. Observe that phenomena year after year, and then make your own laws, make your own what you call thumb rules. So I think you really answered your question that we have to somehow kind of control the greed. Now, controlling the greed, it is easier said than done because collectively it has to happen. Because if I control my greed, but my neighbor doesn't, then I am a loser. That is the kind of social engineering aspect we have to work about. And secondly, conjunctive use. Yes, you are very right. We have to go for conjunctive use, but that has to be based on certain principles which may vary from one watershed to the other. It may depend on the one is your geology. It may depend also on the water use pattern or the cropping pattern. Yes, Shashikan.
I think you have answered his question, sir.
Yeah,
Uh,
thanks, Shashikan.
so I
He
will,
sent the message. He sent the message.
yes,
Thank you.
yes. I will move to next question. Um, Sushanta Das sir has asking, what are the consequences of a degraded watershed?
Consequences mean
Impacts, I think.
impact. Yeah, degraded watershed means your soil erosion has occurred to the extent that it has affected your water availability. So soil erosion's first impact is your reduction in soil moisture. Soil moisture reduction leads to your degradation of biomass. So soil erosion also takes away the what we call the topsoil. The topsoil is the most fertile soil, which also contains the flora and fauna. So if we are losing that, that is the first indication, or rather first impact of degradation. So your productivity of land reduces. Second is because the land has become less productive, its infiltration capacity reduces, or actual infiltration reduces. Infiltration is directly proportional to your recharge, that is groundwater recharge, because the infiltrated water becomes percolates into the groundwater into aquifer, and it is available to you in the wells. And I'm talking of the hard rock regions. I'm not talking of the alluvial plains of Bengal and Bihar. But in hard rock region, your groundwater reduction is the second what you call impact. The third impact is your biodiversity. The biomass that you are using, the crops you are using, they reduce. I mean, this happens in two ways. One, it happens naturally uh, because of the degraded soil, certain crops cannot be grown. Second, because of our choice of popular crops. Popular crops means those crops which have got little social status. Like I always give the example of wheat and sugarcane, uh, and some certain fruits. People go in for those crops which may not be sustainable in that particular, uh, mm, or their productivity will be less in degraded watershed. So this is the third impact in terms of loss of biomass production or productivity. So these are three major indicators. You can say that the watershed is degraded. I think that was your question.
Yes, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. One last question. Uh, Comment on Jal Yukta Shivar Abhiyan impact in Maharashtra.
Uh, you want my comment? A paper written
Yes.
by Sopecom.
Hmm.
Uh, but what is happening in Jal Yukta Shivar is totally unscientific, largely speaking. I mean, you may have something like 5 to 10 or maybe 100 scientifically done things. But I always give an example of my village barber. My village barber got a very brand new Ustara razor. So he was so enthused with this new Ustra, he started kind of shaving everything. First all the men, then all the animals, then all the inanimate objects. So it is like over enthusiasm with one kind of excavator that you got, you started digging pits everywhere here and there. So Jal Yukta Shivar unfortunately has led to that. In irrespective of the need and irrespective of the geological conditions of the particular stream or this thing, we have been kind of gone in for very large scale digging. Now, large scale digging helps mostly your contractors, mostly the excavator owners, but has it really benefited the farmers? Has it really increased the recharge? Has it really reduced the evaporation rates? That has not happened. In fact, by digging the tank beds and by digging the river beds,
Hello.
yes, can you hear me now? I
Ah,
think
yes, sir.
I think you muted me. Now I think
No,
I
no.
am unmute.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes. So I think that some good things have happened, but in general, not so good things have also happened in Jal Yukta Shivar.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir, for your detailed explanation regarding these questions, and also for a very informative and nice session. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Madan Penke, sir, from VNMKB Parbani, to propose vote of thanks on behalf of all the participants. Sir, please.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Am I
sir.
audible?
Yes, sir.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Vaibhav. Today, we are very fortunate to hear Engineer Yughandhar Mandavkar sir, who is well known for his contribution in the field of watershed management. Dr. Mandavkar sir has addressed the various issues on watershed management, particularly the regeneration of the natural resources. He also covered some of the impacts of the Kadvanchi watershed development project with respect to increase in crop yield as well as the groundwater availability. He also addressed some of the implications of the watershed development project. So on behalf of the participant, on behalf of the organizing team, I would like to extend my sincere thanks to Engineer Yughandhar Mandavkar sir for sparing his valuable time and sharing his experiences and his guidance, particularly in the field of watershed management. So once again, on behalf of the organizing team and participants, I am thankful to Engineer Mandavkar sir. On behalf of the participant and on my own behalf, I express my sincere thanks to Dr. Atul Atre sir and Dr. Virendra Barai for giving me an opportunity to participate in this training program. So once again, I am thankful to all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. With the permission of today's speaker, organizing secretary, co-organizing secretary, I declare this session is over. Shall I close?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.